Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, and I'm going to be talking about Big Little Lies, Season 2, Episode 2. It's called Telltale Hearts. So, this episode is a big one. Katara's not here, of course, this week because she's moving, today. So, she did watch the episode, though. I'll tell you about some reactions that I heard from her later on, but so episode 2 of Big Little Lies, though, is a huge episode. It is a huge episode. It's a hell of a one to miss because this episode kind of reveals a lot of the lies. Like, a lot of the lies, not the big one. The big one that Bonnie killed Perry, of course, is the one that's still contained and still eating away at her. And, you know, at one point, Bonnie even refers to it as an entity. She says, it's coming for us. And Madeline's like, who? And she's like, the lie. The lie's coming for us. But so much other stuff gets revealed in this episode. We're talking Ziggy, the nature of his conception to the other kids. Although, I mean, we hear that the kids have known about it for a while. And then, of course, we also have Madeline's affair that comes out as well. So, a lot of big things happening here. So, to start with Celeste and, I guess, Jane by association and the kids. I mean, early on, there's some great moments in this episode that are great in a very infuriating way, mainly coming from Mary Louise, who, I mean, there's a really funny moment with her early on in Madeline where, you know, Celeste actually crashes her car because she falls asleep at the wheel because she's been taking some medication. And in an effort to hide this from Mary Louise, who, you know, isn't really buying any of it, Madeline, you know, says, "Oh, I had an emergency," and Celeste came to see me, and she's like, "What kind of emergency did you have?" You know, not willing to just let it go, having to prod and pry your way into the truth. And Madeline says, "The kind short people have," which is a callback to last episode where she said she doesn't trust short people and said that said that Madeline was short. So that was obviously a very funny line, but she has a lot of moments like that are less funny later in the episode. And basically, we have this big revelation where they find out that the kids, to some extent, know about Ziggy and Max and Josh being brothers. And when they actually trace it back and they try to find out who knows and how someone found out, it turns out it was actually Chloe. Chloe heard some of this over the phone from Madeline. So it was Madeline's mouth, Madeline's big mouth led to this. And she, of course, gets very mad at Chloe, gives her right to trouble, who's very sorry. And we have the other parents kind of have to deal with this information and talk about it to their kids. Jane talks to Ziggy about it, and it's a really heartbreaking scene in a lot of ways because she gets really upset on the phone and, you know, hangs up and goes to speak to Ziggy and starts asking him questions. And, you know, he's known since August, and he says that he didn't want to ask about it because she would just lie. And she's like, okay, yeah, their dad was your dad too. And she said, I honestly didn't know it was him though until last year. You know, for all that time, every time you asked, I never knew. So she's honest about that. But the real heartbreaking part is when he says, because she asked what else he heard, how much he knows, and he said that Chloe said that he did something to you with salt, that he put salt on you or something, he salted you. And it's very clear that what Chloe's overheard is the word assault. And Jane, like, basically having to, it cuts away before we really get to the answer. Obviously, she's going to explain it to him. But it's a really heartbreaking moment where she's got tears flowing down her face as she's about to explain what that means, what it meant. I mean, how much detail she goes into, how specific she gets, I'm sure will be neutered, but it's a really heartbreaking moment because she's not ready to have this conversation with him. He seems a bit young to really have this conversation, but they're kind of being forced into it. And likewise, Celeste wasn't really ready to tell her kids about Ziggy, or about just how bad their father was. In fact, she lies about him multiple times, and, you know, she's even at the therapist's office. I mean, every time Celeste goes to the therapist's office, we end up getting some acting gold. And one of the things that happens here is that, you know, she's like, I still miss him. So the therapist gives her this exercise where she says, remember that time he assaulted you after your office party or whatever it was? And it wasn't one that we saw in season 1. This was one that was previous, and it was in the closet, the big closet we saw a lot of last season. And she's being assaulted again. She's been grabbed by the throat. She's been punched in the stomach, and it's really painful. And she's really upset thinking about it, and she doesn't want to do it, but she does it. And then the therapist says, okay, now picture someone else you care about in your place. Picture Madeline receiving this beating rather than yourself. And phenomenal acting from Nicole Kidman here. She starts screaming at one point, no, 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 no. And the therapist says, did she deserve that? Would you tell her to get out of that relationship? And it's kind of like this running thing of like, with Celeste, this idea that she's determined not to think she was the victim, or that was a big thing last season, and she's determined to think it wasn't as bad. But the moment she imagines someone she cares about being in that position, it becomes a lot clearer. And I think that's true for human nature. I think there's a lot of things that people, when it's happened to themselves, they kind of like make excuses, or they put up with it and say it's not that bad, or whatever it may be. But the second you see it happening to someone else, all of a sudden it's crystal clear. It's like, no, this isn't right. So it's a really powerful scene in that sense. And then later on, the kids are in the back seat and they're asking if Dad was a bad man, and she says no, he was or actually that's later on. She says no, he was a beautiful man. He was a kind, beautiful man. And she's not willing to just say to them, no, your father was awful. And it's an admission that she might have to do someday, possibly this season. More so than that, though, is Mary Louise, because we have a scene with Mary Louise where after the phone calls and realizing the kids have heard, what they've heard, she has to tell Mary Louise this. I mean, don't see the start of the conversation. We cut into it, and she's obviously been explaining who Ziggy is and what Perry had done. And Mary Louise just, flat out says, this girl could be lying. She could have had multiple partners. I don't believe my Perry would do something like that. Those kind of sentences. And Celeste, in order to like sort of stick up for Jane and be like, no, stop victim blaming. Like, your son was not a good man. He hit me. He beat me up repeatedly. And she hits her back with, well, why didn't you go to the police? That is what she hits her back with. And it's a very infuriating scene as a viewer. You're angry at her. You're angry at her for essentially not believing two victims at once. There's now two victims for her son, and she's not believing any of it. She said, no, my Perry wouldn't do that. No. He's better than that. Why wouldn't you go to the police? Which is one of the things the therapist said to her last season, is that people would say that. Why didn't you take more action? But she gets very suspicious as well, because she starts saying, wait, so you found all this out on the day he died? You found this out right before he died. You were going to leave, but you didn't. You were going to do all this, and then he died that day. She's definitely starting to do a lot of speculation in her head right there and then. And she's got some other moments as well that are infuriating. Like earlier on in the episode, when in fact Celeste again is sticking up for someone. She's sticking up for Madeline, and Mary Louise asks, she's bad mouthing Madeline. And Celeste is like, no, she's great. She's a great person. She's a lifeline. Do you know that she once, saved Josh from drowning? And there's a pause, there's a beat, and then Mary Louise says, where were you? And turns it into blaming her for almost letting one of the kids drown. Because we spoke a lot last week about how Mary Louise is very abusive, just not physically. She's abusive in a lot of different ways to her son, but you can definitely see how she's blaming everyone else instead of accepting that her son might be who it is. Now, don't get me wrong, there's an obvious caveat here where, okay, yeah, a mother accepting that her own child is this monster is a difficult thing to accept. In fact, from talking to Tara earlier on, just via text, and we were talking about the episode, she kind of made that point and said that Celeste was kind of doing the same thing last season, where she was denying that this was really as bad as it was, that he wasn't a monster, that there was good qualities, and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, yeah, sure. But my argument to that would be that as soon as, I think if Celeste discovered that there was another victim, if Celeste had discovered that Jane was the victim previously, I think she would have came to the accepting her position a lot quicker than she would have done. I think a second victim, that it's like, it's not just me. Even not even thinking about like the betrayal of like their marriage and the affair side of it, but just the idea that there's another victim, that it's not just her. I think would again open up her eyes a little bit, just a little bit quicker. Obviously, she got to that point by the end, and she's still kind of struggling with it, but she's in a much better place to an extent than she was when she started. Although she is having she's struggling in a lot of different ways. She's not looking and feeling the healthiest right now. And there's obviously a lot of pain. And Mary Louise seems to think this is like when I lost my husband, and it was Perry that got me through it, and your boys will get you through it. But the difference here, of course, is that it's much murkier. I mean, we don't know what Perry's dad was like. Maybe he was awful too, and maybe Mary Louise was once kind of in Celeste's shoes, but dealt with it in the most unhealthy way possible. Where maybe there's something to be said there. Maybe there'll be a redemptive thing for Mary Louise as opposed to what her son had in season 1. Maybe she'll have a story where she does come to accept the people around her. She won't turn her nose up at them, and she will listen to the people who are saying that her son was this person. But honestly, the most powerful scene with Celeste this episode, and the scene with Mary Louise when Mary Louise is denying that her son could have done any of this and is refusing to believe, even though 2 different people are saying, no, he did this, is when the kids start fighting. Josh and Max start fighting. And it's getting kind of rough, and Celeste, starts shouting, break this up, or whatever, and she's saying it separates them, and they're refusing to do it. And I actually, I was thinking that one of them was going to hit her, and it wouldn't be necessarily something that would be physically super painful because they're kids, right? But just the idea that one of them would hit her, and it would be this sign that he has that mentality, and it didn't quite do that, but he did, swear at her. He told her to F off, and she pushes him, and for the first genuine time this season, kind of doesn't sugarcoat who their father is. She doesn't outright say it, but she yells out, "You will not be like him. You will not be like him." And then realizing that she shoved him down, and everyone's kind of standing scared. And you've got in the corner of my eye, I'm seeing Mary Louise watch this and be kind of shocked, and all I can see is her filling a diary of reasons why she should take the kids away from her. I'm seeing why, my daughter-in-law isn't suitable, isn't fit to be a mother. I'm going to take custody of the kids. I can see her thought process almost going over there. So I'm curious to see if it actually goes down that path, or if it's something that she's just going to hold over as the season goes on. But a very powerful scene, obviously from an acting point of view. And it's funny because so much of season 1, there was this speculation that Ziggy might be taking on traits of whoever the rapist was, right? And while I don't love the reveal of who the rapist was as a plot point, I have to admit I do kind of like the dramatic point that it's making this season. And that dramatic point is essentially that Ziggy came from Perry, but he was never around in Ziggy's life, so because of that, he has none of his qualities. However, the kids that he was around for, the kids who saw him speak to their mother, the kids that saw him interact and saw his temperament, they are taking on his traits in a way that Celeste is now trying to fight. And I think it's that nature versus nurture thing, except in this case they're both nature. They're both examples of naturally coming from him, but it's the nurturing side that's dangerous. It's the nurturing side that are really taking on the qualities. And of course, by the end, Celeste and Jane have the kids together to have a brother play date because they want the kids to know each other in that way and form that bond and be kind of, I guess, honest as they can be about it. And it's the sort of thing where I don't know how much Celeste has told them now about Perry, but she kind of has to soon or eventually, because Ziggy has been told very explicitly by Jane, to an extent, what Perry did and why he exists. And because of that, it's going to spread to the other kids. You have to imagine Jane and because Jane and Celeste have a couple of nice scenes here where they kind of hold hands and sort of comfort each other, and because at one point they go to see each other and Celeste we agreed that we would wait and tell them later, and Jane's I know we did, but I just can't lie. He's asking questions now, and he knows enough already that I can't lie to him anymore. I have to this burden has to be off my shoulders. So no, that plot is really well done, and the highlight of the episode, I think, even though there's a lot of other good moments in this episode, I think the Celeste and Jane and the kids and Mary Louise's commentary and refusal to believe, Celeste and by proxy Jane, what's happened with Perry is really powerful. It's really hard hitting. It's frustrating. I think it does this neat thing where season 1 very much put us in the shoes of Celeste. It put us in the shoes of Celeste where we felt scared for her. We feared Perry whenever he was around, and it made us feel like it made us empathize with the abuse victim, and to an extent put us in their shoes. I think this season is keeping us in her shoes, but is now doing it on the other side where she's been doubted by someone and is letting us feel that frustration. So once again, we're very much along for the ride with Celeste, and it's very well done. So excellent. Madeline, after fighting with Mary Louise somewhat, so basically because Bonnie's so out of it, and they find Bonnie walking down the side of the road, who says she's hiking and whatnot, she basically says, "Hey, I think Abby should come back and live with us," because Bonnie actually just agrees immediately. As soon as Madeline suggests it, instead of fighting or whatever, she's like, "Yeah, I can't offer what she needs right now. So yeah, she should go back and live with you." And they have a bit of an honest conversation about it. She opens up a little bit about how she feels about how the killing is weighing on her. But when Abby's there and she's talking to Madeline, she basically throws in her face at one point, you were screwing the theater director last year. And Madeline gives her shit, and she starts ranting about it, and then as soon as she said it, I was like, why are you saying that out loud in the house? Now, to the character's credit, she does say afterwards that Madeline told her he wasn't home, so okay. I can't say that Abby's a complete being completely what's the word I'm looking for? Just inconsiderate, I guess. That doesn't feel harsh enough, but so because she thought he wasn't home, but as soon as she said it, because we didn't know that, I immediately thought, wait, Ed could hear that. Like, what's going on? And he's standing right there, and Madeline has to turn around, and there's an attempt to lie, as is the norm on this show. She says, no, you misheard that last part, as if that was going to work. And he just grabs his keys and he's leaving, and she's like, oh, where are you going? And obviously at this point feeling very stressed and scared of what his reaction is. And he's like, to get my ears checked. And it kind of sinks in, and her reaction's so good here. As soon as he leaves, she just smashes her hands against the counter and is dropping F-bombs. And later on when he comes back and they're in the room together, and she's asking him what he's thinking, and she's trying to make it clear that this was her. This has nothing to do with him. This is just about how she was feeling, her own stupidity and whatever. He gets very upset that Abby's known for a year, and he questions if Chloe also knows. And one of the nice little beats in here that I really liked from Ed is that he says, my daughter's known for a year, and yes, I do think of her as a daughter when he's talking about Abby, because obviously it's Nathan's daughter. And that was it was a good bit of writing. It's a really good bit of not vindictive. I don't think it's vindictive in this case, or at least, I mean, it kind of is, but it's not something I would say the character themselves is being vindictive. I don't think the person would be vindictive for this. I think saying that and pointing that out in the middle of this conversation is pointing out where he felt with them as a family, and how close they were, or how he felt they were at least, and how much this is just shattered. It's kind of twisting the knife of how bad Madeline feels right now, but it's not too much. He's not saying something intentionally mean. He is almost turning up the pain a little bit by pointing out the good things that she is ruining right now. And it will sting, and I think it does sting Madeline, because she does want the perfect married life. She does want this life that she's built for herself with Ed. And he storms out the scene saying, I think this is over, and that's kind of where we end with them. We see Madeline later on kind of just crying outside, looking at the ocean as she does. But It's a really well done scene again, much like a lot of the scenes in this episode. Once we get to the second half of this episode, everything's just like flying off the handle. There's just so much going on, so much big revelations are coming out. And like I say, Ed's had a couple of weird scenes, but for the most part, he's been a fairly upstanding guy. For the most part. A couple of weird lines here or there. And the whole thing with Nathan's a bit odd. Which does we get a little bit of that in this episode. Where I actually again I sympathize with Ed because Nathan comes up and says I'm running, and he's like, for office, because that's what I thought he meant. It sounded like he was saying he was running for something, but he's like, no, I'm running to try and be closer to. He's basically going again to talk about his wife to Ed, but immediately gets upset when Ed drops a joke about asking him to take his wife out for lunch. It's really funny, but which actually nicely plays into the Nathan storyline where, you know, Bonnie's mother accuses him of not really being observant with his wife and not really knowing what's going on in her head to the extent that he should. So I think as much as that's played off by him just acting shocked that she said that, I think it does actually kind of get to him a little bit, because that's essentially why he went to Ed. He was hoping that the husband of his ex-wife would do a better job than him, even though he's supposed to know Bonnie way better than anyone else. But yeah, so that scene with Madeline's fantastic, and we'll see kind of where that leads. And now that Madeline's forced to be honest in a way that she hasn't before, and you know she's been wanting to tell him for a long time. She said that last season, and it's been a year later, and she's still not said. So we'll see how that goes. I mentioned Bonnie's mother came to town. Nathan calls her in to help. Not as much to say about this plot. I mean, we're getting a little bit like our mother is mystical. She believes that she has visions and clearly, you know, is spiritual, which is the word I should have used. I shouldn't have said mystical. I meant spiritual. She's spiritual. That was the word I was trying to say. And she leaves like a little, you know, crystal and some heirlooms kind of out by her bed, and you know, Bonnie kind of like, you know, gives them back and says, no, I don't want this in my life. And she tries to tell her she's having visions of someone drowning, and Bonnie doesn't really want to hear it. But, you know, we get that. I think one observation I did have that was really interesting to me is how her mother is actually in a relationship that's very similar to her and Nathan. And not just because she's married to a white man, but because even at the dinner where they kind of get into a bit of a fight, like Nathan and Bonnie's dad both feel like they're kind of like on this, like reacting the same way in that side of the relationship, where they're both trying to like just calm things down. It feels like the relationship is very similar, which is funny because earlier on in the episode, Bonnie's mother accuses Bonnie of like being in the relationship with Nathan for weird reasons, for wanting to build walls around her and be kind of unique here. She mentions that she's not seen any other black people since she's arrived, and that being with someone like Nathan, who's a bit of a, as she puts it, a simpleton when it comes to recognizing feelings and you know, when it comes to emotions, that she's maybe done that intentionally. But then later on in this dinner table scene, it seems like she's kind of done the same thing, at least from the small snippet we get of him. It feels a lot like mother like daughter, which again goes to, you know, Perry and Mary Louise feeling like they're kind of similar in a lot of ways. We're definitely getting this sense of apples not falling far from the trees. So yeah, that's kind of all I've got to say about that, but it's still interesting to see where this goes and how this opens up. Although it is worth mentioning that our mother does at the dinner table say, well, you've not narrowed it down, Nathan, right? How about this? How about it started on the night that guy was killed at that trivia game? Because that's clearly the turning moment. That's the turning point in this mood shift that Bonnie's had. That's when things changed. And I've been here, you know, she doesn't say this last part, but she's basically insinuating, I've been here a day and I figured that out. And she's been like this for you know, 8-9 months, whatever it's been. So, you know, interested to see where that goes going forward. And then the final plot that I have to talk about is Renata and Gordon, who out of nowhere, Gordon gets arrested by the FBI. They come in and they take him, handcuff him. Renata's freaking out, you know, thinking this is unjust. What are you doing? What, you can't just come up and attack someone, blah, blah, blah. And she later goes to see him in you know, in jail, and you know, got the phones on the other side of the interrogation. Not interrogation, you know, the visitor glass. That's not an interrogation room. You know what I mean? Basically, he reveals that he's committed some fraud. And as I joked earlier when I was talking to Tara about this, some light treason. which he didn't do treason, but I was just joking that because I was thinking of Arrested Development, and we made a lot of Arrested Development jokes last week. So, and yeah, Renata kind of freaks out, and it's like, wait, like, what about my half of the money? Like, I made half that money. Like, because as we know, she's a career woman. She's still got a job. She's very successful, and she's like, no, half of that money's mine. And he assures her, as if this is this is going to comfort her, that Amabella's trust fund is safe because that's classed differently. That's separate. But everything else, including the house, we're going to be broke by the end of the year. Between lawyer costs and everything else. And she has this great freak out moment where she yells at the end, I'm not going to be rich, or something to that extent. And he gets out on bail, and she has this daydream where they're asking for millions of dollars, and the judge will start laughing at her. But it's just a daydream. It's just her, like, sort of. And I was like, it leads to this great scene in the car where she's driving him home after he gets out on bail, and he basically. He upsets her. I'll just say that. I can't remember the exact line of dialogue that sets her off. I wish I did. Because I'm so like hypnotized by her reaction in the rest of the scene that I can't remember for the life of me what he was saying before. It was basically just about not taking the blame and saying that she should understand because he says that, we all want more. You should know that more than anyone. And she freaks out and says, wait, when have I ever insinuated that I want more? And she gets so mad, she's like, this is my car, get out. And she makes him get out. It's, it's busy road. He gets outside and she drives off. And the best part of it is that she gives him, she flips the bird at him right with both hands, but she has one hand out the side door and the other one going out the sunroof. And it's glorious. It is absolutely glorious. And she does turn around. She drives for a little bit and then says, F, and she does a U-turn and goes and picks him up. But it's delightful. It's a delightful sequence. And I think, obviously what I'm really noting here in this episode, apart from the big stuff coming out for all the other plots, is that both Bonnie and Renata feel like they're getting more plot this year. It feels like they're getting their own stories a bit more, Bonnie, especially last year, really just felt like she was there to be a tangential element of Madeline's story. Like Nathan and Bonnie were kind of tangentially just always part of Madeline and Ed's story for the most part. And this year I feel like, no, she's getting her own plot. Her mother's visiting her. We're dealing with what she's going through specifically. And it wasn't something we really dealt with as much last year or last season. So no, I think that's interesting, and I think it's very interesting that we're getting all these things coming out. And that's like, I enjoyed episode 1, especially after talking about it after the fact. This episode, I think, was fantastic. This was much better than, I mean, not last week was bad. Again, I liked last week's episode. This was a great episode. This was, everything's firing on all cylinders. Like, once it got going, almost every scene was like special and memorable. And yeah, so I'm excited about the rest of the season now. And obviously this review was a little bit shorter than last week's, despite the fact that there was bigger stuff happening, because it's just me talking on my own. Tara will be back next week for episode 3, so look forward to that. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. You can like and subscribe and all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. Well, that's for Mail Fuzz specifically. If you want to get me specifically on Twitter, it's at Wibble89. You can do that. You can, of course, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/mailfuzztv. You can support us for as little as $1 per month and unlock new goals, get some rewards in the tiers, all that kind of thing. But otherwise, that's it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?